Okay, then let's start. So today I'm going to talk about how you can get from, let's say, a sensor deep in your industrial environment and get the data from the sensor to the dashboard, and how we can do and what we can do in between. So my name is Ishan Jain, and I am Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft. My primary area today is data and AI, but I used to be apps and infra, so I have foot in both areas. And I'm also what we call advanced cloud expert for open source. So today I'm going to talk about a bit of introduction to IoT, go through a couple of architecture designs, and how we can embed like data analytics in the together with IoT, look at some reference architecture from Microsoft, and maybe a demo. So what is IoT, or Internet of Things? If you think of it for like, it is nothing new. We have been using technology, what we call IoT today, for a lot of time. And today it's just we group a lot of technologies what we have been using for last maybe 30 years or maybe 40 years now, and put them under umbrella which we call IoT. Like for the last 40 years, we have been having these PLCs in the industry, programmable logic controllers. And you connect your sensors to that, and they have their own buses and so on. But today, we have moved beyond proprietary, the serial communication or parallel communication to something which is more Wi-Fi or proprietary, but more connected to internet. And if I remember, like 16 years ago, I was working on a project where we were working with PLCs and embedded stuff. And even back then, like it's again 16 years ago, the tech was remarkably like what we have today. There are some differences, which is more in like leap in the tech due to the time, but still it was a lot similar. But if you think again, like in your phone today, in your hands, you have more processing power than what they had for the whole space program back in 60s. So we do have moved a lot since then. And for me, IoT is just an umbrella term for things like sensors, software, and other embedded technology we must use to connect and monitor things over the internet. And if we start looking at the simplest architecture to connecting something to internet and getting something plotted to a dashboards. So here we have a device. It can be anything. But let's say this device is a Raspberry Pi, which I have with a simple button. I can connect this Raspberry Pi, to something called IoT Hub. And in there, we have something, let's say we have provisioned event grid. So event grid can now take all the data, doesn't matter how much it is. It can handle millions, even billions rows concurrently, and dispatch the data at the speed of my storage. In this case, which is our blob storage. So it will dispatch the data in the rate the blob storage can write, but it can receive the data at any rate. And I can use my Power BI to read the data from the blob storage. So this is the simplest, so to say, the most simplest architecture where you are using IoT Hub. I could, like, if I'm using like something advanced like Raspberry Pi, then I can probably dump the data directly to blob storage without IoT Hub. But things get a bit different when you have things like an industrial environment, where you have machines which are more specialized. They might not even have their own communication protocol. All they know is they have sensors and they can send the output to I/O. So what do? You connect that to something like IoT Edge. So IoT Edge IoT Edge here can work either as a proxy for relaying the data, or it can also connect to machines or sensors directly. So, and it also has one more, so to say, benefit. Instead of exposing each and every, let's say in this case, robot to the internet, we can send that to a single tunnel which is established between IoT Edge and IoT Hub. The data gets more secure, you have less vulnerable surface. And IoT Edge, as I said, can also be used for devices that are not capable of connecting to internet directly. And here we can see how it splits, like the on-prem devices and the Azure, how you can connect things that are on-prem on a large scale to Azure. But let's move on and look at something like a smart vehicle. We have a truck which is connected to internet. We can monitor things like speed, temperature, road conditions, weather, how is the engine doing, what RPM is it running on, how are the brakes, what's the temperature of the brakes, how is how is the driver driving. And a lot of organizations actually needs that data in order to function today. Because of the, like, how do you put it? Because of the impatience we as consumers have, they have more tighter deadlines. And because of that, they have to monitor each and every parameter in real time. And this data can again be used to either just plot in the Power BI, or let's say if we are monitoring engine, the brakes, so we can also do some preventive maintenance. If we see that RPM aren't optimal for this machine, for this vehicle, then it needs to get repaired, go for maintenance, and so on. And if we look at the healthcare, we have been having these like activity bands or smart healthcare devices, which have gained a lot of popularity in the last 5 to 6 years. And one of these, as I said, is like these activity bands, which might be a Fitbit, your Apple Watch, or Samsung Gear, or anything. And it records your data, like heartbeat, your steps, and so on. And in consumer case, it sends to something like Google Fit. But let's say if we can send that data to doctors, then they can see, or if we have some specialized devices which can measure your heart rate a bit more accurately, your blood pressure, and so on, and maybe even monitor your other senses that maybe a doctor need, they can actually, with help of IoT, monitor a patient remotely. So patient can be in their own environment, the environment they've been relaxed in, like their own home, but doctor can still have the full monitoring capabilities. And if you connect these devices to cloud, it's not just monitoring the health, but also it can alert if there are some anomalies, like spike in heart rate or spike in blood pressure or something. Or one of the user cases has been like people have been hacking some like these blood sugar measurement devices for diabetes. And because they have no control over it, they can more automate the insulin intake and even send the alerts to EMTs, emergency services, if they have like a person has very bad is in very bad condition due to blood sugar level. But let's circle back to our simple architecture and see how we can improve it. Like here we have, again, IoT Edge with some robots, but it doesn't need to be just robots or machines. It can be sensor in any type, like a surveillance camera, uh, any type of connected device, or like a combination of like how is the ambient light is, how the ambient temperature is, how is the vehicle drivings. Like if you are working on an airport, you want to know each and every time where each vehicle is in in relation to an aircraft and so on. But also, let's say you have people working in a nuclear power plant. You want to maybe monitor the uh, radiation levels in there and how they are reacting to that radiation levels. Like if somebody is a bit sick, then you know that in that environment it might not be good, and you can monitor all that with a simple heart rate monitor. And it's not only that we can connect through IoT Edge or anything. Like you have other other connection capabilities in industrial environment, like a cellular network, 3G, 2G, 4G, 5G, and there are other specialized networks like LoRaWAN, which are designed for IoT to connect to things like IoT Hub. And again, we are looking at still the same on the Azure side. Everything that is changing is on the sensor side or the gateway side. And here is like, if we really want to do a little more advanced analytics on it, we can, as soon as it comes into like IoT Hub, we can dispatch the data anywhere, be it logic apps, functions, even Kubernetes, Stream Analytics to do a lot of real-time analysis, Databricks to do more heavy lifting, and then you store the data in either like a database or a blob storage, or you can create alerts. Like here we have notification hub. Let's say there was some anomaly detected. So you can actually create an alert and send it to like an email, SMS, or any other notification, like a push notification on a mobile also works here. And then you can have something like Power BI, your custom app, a web app, or a mobile app, or anything to explore the data. If you look at a bit more categorically, we can divide it into things like sensors. These are all our sensors, but then this is our gateways. And then we have IoT Hub, then we have compute. So compute is not limited to these services. Like I didn't put it here like something like machine learning and so on. You have slew of services in Azure for compute. Same here for storage and messaging. You have slew of services. And then last category, which I define, is presentation, how you present the data. And then this is a reference architecture which Microsoft has developed together with partners, customers, and so on. So this is more my interpretation, and here's more official Microsoft interpretation. So you have your devices which can connect directly to IoT Hub with help of DPS, the device provisioning service, or via IoT Edge. And from IoT Hub, you can either do stream analytics, function, or storage. So that's, and then from there you have hot, warm, or cold path. Cold path is basically you're not going to use the data immediately, or you don't know when to use it. You're going to use it, so you're just going to store it. Warm path is like you will use it periodically, like once a day or something. Hot path is more like real time or every 5 minutes, more frequent. And then you can either store it or further process it. You can use, like in this case, logic apps to process it, or you can use Cosmos to store it, Synapse to store it and process it, and machine learning to run your either as example data or run your machine learning model on it, so that you can actually get some anomalies or anything, outliers, and so on. And then we can send that data to something like business integration, which can be analytics services, or we can send it to custom apps, which can be mobile, web, or even desktop apps, or as I talked before, like a presentation layer, which can be either Power Platform or Power BI. And then underneath all, we recommend that you use Azure Security Center for IoT. So Microsoft divided all these things into three different buckets or categories. One is things, what you're connecting, the sensors and so on, and how you're connecting. Insights is how you are computing, processing, and storing the data. And then lastly, the action, what can you get out of the data? What can you do on the data? And how you can explore it, access it, and so on. And as I said earlier, at the bottom is our security. So security is present from all the way from left to right. And this is just an example. This is not like the reference architecture that everybody has to follow. This is just an example. Each and every service in Azure is somewhat interchangeable with something else. So we do have like more like, let's say, more specialized service for some things which might suit better for your architecture. Like if you want to store it in a blob storage, that's fine. But if you want relational data, which you want to maybe turn into cubes and so on, then it's maybe better to store it in SQL Server to start with. Or you want to process the data or maybe wash the data before using it. You might use something like Azure Functions to remove unnecessary stuff which are coming from the sensors. And let's put the IoT in a context of maybe something else. So IoT doesn't really need to have a separate flow or architecture flow than your rest of the systems. It can be, or it should be, part of your overall strategy and architecture. So here, the IoT is down here. That's a small part of the overall architecture. So here we have things like data from a database, file storage, or whatever, any third party on-prem, and whatever data you want to process. We use Data Factory to store the data, to get the data, and store that in a data lake. And we're using the same technology almost to get the data from IoT sensors. So you have IoT devices connected via DPS, device positioning services. And then we use Event Hub or Event Grid or IoT Hub to capture the data. And in this case, we're just storing that data in Data Lake. Data Lake is a more specialized version of blob storage, which is designed for data services. And then from there, we can send it to maybe like Databricks to process the data, prep the data. And then we can maybe send the data to Synapse, which can do more data warehousing on it, create cubes with analysis services, and then present it into Power BI. Or we can take another path that we store the data in Cosmos and then present it into a custom web application or any type of application for that matter. Cosmos is more of a global distributed database. So it is NoSQL, so it works with documents. So if you're getting something like JSON documents from your sensors, so it might be better to store it in Cosmos because it understands that better. Otherwise, if you're using something like SQL Synapse, then you might need to transfer the JSON to SQL or in a table format. Let's see if the demo works. Here's my Azure portal. And everything in Azure is divided into resource groups. And then I already created a resource group which is called IoT October 2020 here. And it's very easy to create an IoT hub in Azure. You just click Add, search for IoT, and here it's the suggestion is already like IoT Hub and IoT Hub DPS. I'm just going to choose IoT Hub for now and create. Here you can see the plans and like users information and so on. A little bit of description, but let's just create a IoT Hub. It pre-filled my resource group because I came from there. The region, it's always best to use the one that's nearest to where your sensors are going to be. In my case, it is North Europe. And then a name. It can be anything, but it needs to be unique for the whole Azure. And it should be descriptive of what you're doing. So for me, IoT October 20 and B, because I already have one. So that's descriptive enough for me, but it depends on how your organization or you do your naming of services. And under networking, we can choose like if you want to open the whole thing for the whole internet, or where you're just allowing whitelisting some IPs, or we want to use private endpoints. Private endpoints are more private tunnels. Like you can use then like VPNs and stuff to connect to that, and it is not exposed to the internet at all. In this case, we will just use private public endpoint, all networks. And then under size and scale, we can choose different sizes. You have several standard tiers, several basic tiers, but there's also free tier. So if I choose that, and it won't let me create one because I already have one, but okay, for the demonstration purposes, it's fine. You can do 8,000 messages per day on a free tier, and it doesn't cost you anything. And it has capability of having IoT Edge, device management, cloud to device commands. So you can actually send back commands. It's not one-way communication. You can communicate with the devices wherever they are from Azure. You can do message routing and, of course, device to cloud messages. What you're missing in free tier is basically more advanced security. But if you go to standard, then you have a security center enabled on it. And you can also do how many partitions you want to do on device to cloud messaging. In free tier, it's always 2. Next, tags. You can tag different things. Tags are a good way to search for things in Azure if you have like a lot of services in there. Like I like to have a tag called project, and then I put something like LDNA in this case. So the meetup's name. So I know this belongs to this project. This is that's where I needed it. That's why I created it. And then we go there to review and create. It will tell you if it can create it or not, and then why it failed, why it doesn't, it's not a valid configuration. For me, for instance, free tier and the error message is I can only have one per subscription. Like if I change to basic one, which still isn't that much of a cost, and we are upgraded from 8,000 to 400,000 messages per day. So if I go to review and create now, and this button only gets enabled when it is able to validate the whole deployment. I'm not going to create it because it's going to take some time. So I have done my prep work a bit. If you go back to my resource group, and we can see I already have a IoT Hub. IoT Hub can take from a minute to 5 minutes to create. So it doesn't take that much time, but it's always good to So I created it ahead of time just to save up here. So under here, shared access policies, you can set different policies, how it's shared, and so on. You can add more, edit. Under identity, you can tell that the services in Azure can access it as a managed identity, or the IoT Hub can access other services as managed identity. Managed identity are a modern take on what we used to call service accounts back in the day. So these are basically services in Azure AD, which have their own basically user, and you don't need to remember their password or anything. It is all managed by Azure AD for you. And if we go down to price and scale, I can change the pricing and so on. And then scale of the tier. Under networking, same there. It's what type of network, like disabled and it's private. So I need to have a private if I disable a public access, or whitelist, or all networks. If I go into private, I can add a private endpoint. Unfortunately, I don't have any endpoints right now. Certificates, you can upload your own certificates, like your root certificate, what you're using for devices. You have a couple of built-in endpoints, like how you're going to connect to the IoT Hub itself. So here you have a connection string to the IoT Hub. You can configure failover, like Azure always work in so-called twin pairs. Each region in Azure has a twin somewhere else. So because I chose North Europe, my twin is going to be West Europe. So that's my primary failover site. So if it depends on what type of service you're running and what you want to do. So we can just click on start failover, and it will, if something happens in North Europe, everything goes to West Europe for automatically. Yeah, nothing there. Under IoT devices, I can add new devices here. I need to have a device ID and how it's going to be signed. Is it going to be use symmetric key, self-signed, X509 certificate, or a X509 CA signed? CA signed is like if you have your own root certificate from like VeriSign or something. And then you can also set like this is if let's say this device we are adding is part of a bigger device or bigger machine, then you can club them as a parent device. And all the devices we add will come up here. Here we have IoT Edge. So again, I can add IoT Edge devices. Same as with any other IoT device, it's how the device ID, how it's going to be connected or authenticated. And here's a prime example how you want to use parent and child devices. Your parent is going to be like an IoT Hub or IoT Edge, sorry, and then you will have several different devices on it so that it's easy to know for you to know how they're connected. And if you go back, you can add a bit of configuration like digital twin. You can create digital twin from here. And then what digital twin does is that it takes you need to map the devices, let's say on a 3D dimensional map of a smart building. You have ambient temperature sensors, you have light sensors, you have maybe other type of sensors like moisture and so on. So you can map that into like a room, and then you can see exactly how that room is doing. And different type of settings. And IoT twin module. Then we have something like file upload. Where is it going to upload the data? Or message routing. Message routing is more like how it's going to route all the messages that it's receiving, all the events. So right now, by default, no, not here. So I can have several endpoints. I have nothing configured as this is brand new, but I can add like event hub, service bus, queue, topic, or directly to a blob storage. If you remember in my example, I was dumping all the data directly to a blob storage. So this is where I'm going to configure that. So it's easy as just click on add and choose. So endpoint name, what I want to call that endpoint, and what container. So I have different several, let's say different storage containers, and I can click on one of them, and then I have one container it, or I can actually create a new container for it. Let's do that. There it is. And as you can see from my name, it's a lake, which I created in June 2020. So this is more, for me, it's more specialized for data, but it's still a blob storage. So it does connect in the same way. And I can choose what type of encoding it's going to use or and format. Is it going to be Avro or JSON? Because I can understand JSON, I might choose JSON. Frequency is um, the maximum amount of time before the data is written to the blob. So as I said, like it can choose, it can buffer the data before it dispatches it to the blob. And then chunk size is how big of a chunk it's going to be, each blob. So what it's going to do is save what do you call array of JSON objects, and this is how the my format is going to be as file name is configured here. So the name of the IoT hub, which partition it is on. As you remember, free tiers has by default 2 partitions, so it might be good to know which partition they're going to be on. Year, month, date, and time when it was created, and so on. And if I click on create, it will create an endpoint for me. Okay. While it's working, let's look at this. Because I don't have, I'm not using a standard here, so I don't really have any security center for this. But otherwise, I will be able to access a lot of security center for IoT stuff directly from this pane. And I can set up things like security alerts. It also has some recommendations, but because I don't have that feature enabled in this SKU, so I won't be able to show you here. And again, some settings you can do. And monitoring is using log workspace and Azure Monitor. So if I go down here, logs, not here, workbooks. No, it's in here. So I don't have any diagnostic settings right now. So I can click here, add, and then I can add. So where I want to send all the diagnostic data to. And in this panel is what type of data. So maybe I want to send it to my log workspace, which I already have apparently. And then maybe I want to send everything or just one of it. And now because I don't have any devices connected to it, and unfortunately I was not able to get hands on any IoT devices due to COVID. So I won't be able to show that, how it's connected and so on. But otherwise, I would be able to just run, like here are some example queries, like if there are some connection errors with a device, or if we have any dead endpoints, or summary of errors, and so on. So there's a lot of pre-built queries, but you can obviously write your own because it's in the back and it's just using Custo. And then you can organize the things with like workbooks and so on. And you can also set up alerts based on different rules. So let's say if we have problem with cloud to device communication, we can set up different, like a message abandoned, that we didn't get a ping back or a ACK back. So we can say if it's greater than, let's say, total of 20 messages in last 5 minutes, then it will send an alert. And here in the action, we can define what type of alert. Now I don't have any action group defined for some reason. That's going to take some time. But with that, I can choose, like, I'm not be able to send anything from my IoT hub back to my device. And then I will get an email, a SMS, or a push notification. So we can also integrate things like notification hub with it. Let's go back here. Let's see if it has created our endpoint. Was it here? Not here, sorry. Nope. Yeah, so here's my endpoint now. And I can give it a name. And maybe a bit of routing query, which I don't want to do anything right now. And I can test different routes, but let's just save it. So if I go back to my message routing, I can see on the custom endpoints, I have my IoT 2010 or October 20 endpoint for storage. And here I have a route for that. And if I want, I can also enrich messages for this endpoint. Like add custom key value appear. For instance, I might be adding, I don't know, this is a route on that, so I'm just saying that the device it is coming from is none. And apply, and it will enrich the message. So add more custom data if needed. And value can also be some of the variables which are defined like in like digital twin or IoT Hub and so on. So you can actually concat different messages to create more enriched messages. Yeah, so that's all I had for introduction to IoT and a bit of demo on IoT Hub. While we're doing Q&A, maybe you can go to this QR code or this aka.ms URL and sign up. This will help you to get more future information on IoT Hub or IoT in general in Azure, and also a lot of technical resources, free technical resources which Microsoft have provided for you.
Great presentation, Ishan. Thanks a lot for such comprehensive overview. Thank you so much.